Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Chats, Stats, and Fun Facts, a 2025 season preview brought to you by the Dry Pink Dialogue. Today, we are talking about Tyler Hall, a young Inter-Miami player coming through the academy, potentially the next guy to make a big impact at this club. Saur, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I mention Tyler Hall?
I think curiosity. As you said, he's a young and up-and-coming player from the academy. Lot spoken about him in terms of his future prospects with Inter Miami and what he can be for the first team if he breaks out into the first team. So I'm curious to see what his future holds for us and what he actually brings to the team. I'd like to see more of him this season in the first team. I'd like to see him get some minutes off the bench towards the end of the games, perhaps. I don't know how feasible that's going to be. So I think it's a lot of questions about what his future trajectory at Inter Miami looks like and where he's going to go from here. There's definitely potential. He's up and coming, and I'm sure we're going to get some answers as the season unfolds.
Yeah, and listen, if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, who is Tyler Hall? I've never heard of this name. You're forgiven. He's never made an appearance for the first team. He was signed to a first team contract last January. And then because of the roster constrictions and because Inter Miami had too many players, they had to loan him to the B team for the course of the season, which means he wasn't even eligible to make his first team debut. But he was promising enough to get that first team contract from Inter Miami. And so this is a guy that the club believes in, has long-term potential and a long-term future at the club. So the fact that he hasn't made his debut was more to do with the technicality than to do with the fact that Inter Miami didn't want it to give him a chance or anything like that. So we spent last year on Inter Miami 2, and 0 minutes is his 2024 season with the first team. But he did spend a lot of time with the U.S. under-17 team in the cycle leading up to the World Cup, under-17 World Cup in December of 2023. Here's my fun fact. He was the captain almost every single time he took the pitch for the U.S. under-17 team throughout the entire cycle, and was a starting center back for them. His profile, he's a little bit of an undersized center back. He's probably 5'9", 5'8", 5'10", somewhere in there. And he's young, so he's probably still growing. Quicker. We saw him for the first time this preseason. We did see him a few minutes last preseason in Asia. He did go on that trip. I believe he got a few minutes against the Hong Kong maybe or Vissel Kobe. But we didn't get to see him last year. We got to see him for the first time against Olympia in the preseason. He looks quicker than I remember. I think he looks quicker than a lot of scouts have sort of given him credit for. And so that's who he is as a player. He's a defensive player, center back mostly. I think a lot of people thought or think he might profile to right back eventually. He is right-footed. And that's what we have to go off of.
I'm going to pick up on the thread that you just mentioned towards the end, that he has been profiled as a centre back, but a lot of analysts think he might actually move into the right back role. And that's actually exactly what I thought when I saw him play as well. He's not physically dominating on the field. He's not a big centre back by any means. Of course, he still has a lot of growing to do, and I'm sure that's going to come with time. But as of now, he's fairly small in stature, quite quick. I know there's been some question marks about his pace, but I think he's very good for pace, quite speedy, and commands the back line well, at least at the youth level. But I think when you actually move up to the first team, I'm not sure whether he has the physical presence at this point in time to play as a centre back. That, for me, makes me think perhaps his actual role might be as a right back, and he may profile better in that position. A lot of question marks. He hasn't really played in that right back spot. I haven't seen him play in that right back spot before. So it'll be interesting to see what his coaches tell him and how they develop his play style, how they develop his gameplay over the next few years, because he still, of course, can be molded into a player. But a lot of curious thoughts about him, and more questions than answers at this point in time, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's fair for any Inter Miami fan that hasn't seen a ton of the B team. He has been a locked-in starter for the B team the last 2 seasons, so he's got a very, very comfortable amount of experience at the Inter Miami 2 level. It's not like he spent half a season at the B team and then got promoted to the A team. He's been there for a while. He's been cooking, and like I said, he's been on the national team circuit, the national team, or the youth national team. The program is familiar with this kid and clearly thinks he's got potential. And we talked about him as a right back. I've seen a lot of scouts say this guy might be a right back. He might profile their best. And the club has never really put him there on a consistent basis. He has consistently been a center back for the B team. So I think we have to follow what the club has put in the position that they've put him, because that's what he's played. Now, we saw him play as a left back in the preseason, but of course, I think that was just to get him a few minutes on the pitch, and you wanted to get a lot of substitutions in. So he kind of just had to slot in there because someone else had to slot in at right back, right? So, or and center back. So we'll see. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what type of impact he can have this year. See a guy that gets 17 minutes in 2 bench appearances this year, or is he a guy that's going to get 300 minutes in, 14 bench appearances this year? Like, I think that's a huge difference. But if he can like climb himself into getting 300 minutes and double digit appearances, I think that would be an incredible season for him. And I also wanted to mention Javier Mascherano, undersized center back, understands you got to be really smart and you have to have certain tools. And I think he's going to see this kid and say, we have a lot of similar tools. If he can get his brain to the right spot, if he can get his decision making to the right spot, he doesn't have to be 6'4" to be a quality player. I think Tyler Hall now has the perfect coach for him to break out and become a legitimate MLS player. Now, he's still 18, very young, very raw. I don't think he has the physical profile of a guy like Benjamin Kramaski or David Ruiz, who could survive in the MLS based on their physicality. He's going to have to do it with intelligence, quality play, making good decisions, and using his tools, which is most players. But just a reminder that if we do see him this year, he's very young, very raw, hasn't played at this level. And that's really what I have to say about him. And I'm curious what Javier Mascherano does with him.
18 years old is actually quite young for a centre back as well, because centre backs tend to bloom late when it comes to footballing careers, right? You mentioned Javier Mascherano. Of course, under his coaching, it'll be very interesting to see how Tyler Hall develops. But he also has a prototype in front of him in Noah Allen, and also now Maxi Falcone coming into the club, who are undersized centre backs who don't necessarily have the height for what you consider a good centre back, and yet at least Noah Allen is thriving in that role. I'm excited to see what Maxi Falcone brings into the club. But there's definitely a case to be made that undersized centre backs can have a very important dominating role to play in teams, especially in modern football. One thing I really like about Tyler Hall that I've seen him consistently do is that he's a very aggressive man-to-man defender. So he gets very close to his man. He gets very close to the person on the ball, and he pushes up quite well. That makes me think that if you pair him up with like a nice sweeper defender, someone like Toto Aviles, they would really complement each other. So you mentioned he has the traits, he has the attributes to thrive in that center-back role. And I actually want to see what he can bring to that before he gets transitioned onto the right-back role, if he ever does. For me, Tyler Hall's transition from the youth team to the first team is going to be very normal. And I say normal because it's going to be a natural progression. It's not going to be someone like a Leo Afonso who breaks out into the scene and has a fantastic outgoing for the first team, scores a couple of goals, and now you consider him a first team player. It might be that he plays a couple of games for the first team this season, moves back into the youth team for a little bit. Next season, he gets a little bit more minutes. So it's going to be progressively important how he gets handled. And I think it's going to be a slow progress into the first team. But you need patience with such players. You need patience with centre backs because they bloom late. And there's definitely a player here. And I'm glad that we have Javier Mascherano at the wheel because he's the perfect coach to bring the youth up with him.
No, I think you've put the perfect description on him. He's going to have a normal upbringing. I don't think Leo Afonso is the right comparison. I'm going to give you 3 separate names. The first is Felipe Valencia. Long time ago, Inter Miami signed him when he was just a teenager, and he wasn't ready for the first team, and he never got ready for the first team. Ends up leaving the team after 5 years under contract and 0 first team appearances. That's the worst case scenario. I would never expect that to happen again. I think that was probably some unfortunate circumstances that led to that. The second one is Edison Azcona, a guy who showed real promise in the B team, especially back when he was in the USL, got signed to the first team contract, made some appearances. I think he finished with, a dozen appearances, and they all came off the bench 10, 15 minutes at a time. He got to be on the field with all these guys, but was never really able to break out. Even after a couple years, and then he went on loan, and like he could never make that transition to real depth role player on an MLS team. And then the third one, which is I think what you really want to be if you're Tyler Hall, is Noah Allen, who we saw in 2022 get his first couple appearances with the club, but he did spend most of that season with the B team, right? He came through, was a big prospect for the U.S. youth national team, consistently getting youth national team call-ups, got some minutes with the team in 2022. 2023, again, slowly getting brought in, and then there's an injury. Franco Negri gets hurt. He gets about 10 starts in a row, and then Jordi Alba comes in, and he kind of is able to establish himself in those moments when he was given an opportunity because of an injury. I am a first-team player. I belong here. And then as 2024 goes across and he doesn't have an obvious role, he finds a way to get minutes. He finds a way to improve behind the scenes. And so even though 2024 was year 3 of Noah Allen on the first team, he still was just trying to build himself into a real contributor. And now here we are in 2025, Noah Allen, year 4, but it feels like he's ready to be a real contributor for Inter Miami and in the MLS. So if you're Tyler Hall, right, I guess year 1 was last year, but even if you want to call this year 1, I think it's a 3 or 4 year process for him to become a starter quality or a guy you feel really good about starting games for you. And that's okay. That's normal for a young, especially defensive player. And so I think that's where we have to be with our expectations. Will he get a start this year? I think that would be awesome for him. But, if he gets 6 appearances and 200 minutes or, 3 appearances in 75 minutes, like that's a normal progression into the first team. And then you make it 400 minutes next year. And then then the following year, you can kind of be 1,200, 1,500 minutes and you're really ready for it. So that's where I think we are with Tyler Hall, and anything above that would be cherry cake, right? Cherry pie.
Yep, absolutely. And I think the US Open Cup we'll see a lot of him there. I plan to watch that with our V team playing. I'm not sure if he's eligible
if we can
or
win,
not,
right?
but
If we can win our first game, we'll
exactly.
get a real
And
run going.
that'll be a great way for him to showcase his abilities as well. And again, temper expectations, have patience with him, and I'm sure his future will be bright if he continues to put his head down and do the work. So excited to see what he can do for us.
Okay. Predictions for 2025. Let's get to the over-under. I think I said this too. I'm going to adjust it on the fly. 100 minutes played in 2025 for the first team for Tyler Hall.
I'm going to go under.
Is this a good number? Minutes. Is this a good over?
I think that's a good number. It's a number that made me think. So this is definitely an over under. Okay. So I was confused whether I should go over, but I think it's going to be under just because there's so much competition in the center back positions. There's too much competition in that back line. I think he's too further down the pecking order. And if he does get minutes, it's going to be 5 minutes towards the end of the game or 3 minutes in extra time. And I think it'll be hard for that to accumulate to 100 minutes. If it reaches anywhere close to 100 minutes, I'll be very impressed and happy for him. But I think this season might be a little bit of a stretch. Maybe next season, if he develops more and grows into a more strong, robust player and tries and gets better every month, every training session, I'm sure we'll see more of him.
Yeah, and I think I'll be curious to see in Javier Mascherano's eyes if he's the guy to develop at center back, because we're going to have Ian Frey and Noah Allen and Ryan Saylor who are not going to be first choice options at center back. And so does he see those guys as they're fine, they're ready to go whenever, and when I have a few developmental minutes, I want to give it to Tyler Hall? Or is he going to say, no, those minutes got to go to the Ian Freys of the world. Let's get Noah Allen more comfortable at center back. Let's get Ryan Saylor his minutes because he's working hard in training, right? So I think that'll be interesting. And we don't really know how Javier Mascherano is going to deal with that. So I'm also going to go under. I think we're going to get like 10 appearances for 80 minutes, something like that. And I think if that happens, Tyler Hall should be really happy. And I think that would be progress into what he's going to be in 2 or 3 years, right?
Absolutely.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. And as always, we will see you in the next one. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.